We ready to go, Sam? All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm pleased to be here alongside the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services, Mike Ellis, the Minister of Justice, Mickey Amery, the Minister of Transportation and Economic Corridors, Devin Dreeshen. We also have Justin Wright, MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, and Inspector Ken Howell from the Alberta Sheriffs, who will share information on progress on our border security initiatives. But first, I'd like to address everyone in regard to the current tariff situation. My fellow Albertans, sadly, the United States President Donald Trump has decided to place a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods sold to the United States, with the exception of energy products, which will be tariffed at 10%. These tariffs are unjustified and a clear breach of the North American Free Trade Agreement, or CUSMA, that was signed by President Trump during his first term. This economic attack on our country, combined with Mr. Trump's continued talk of using economic force to facilitate the annexation of our country, has broken trust between our two nations in a profound way. It is a betrayal of a deep and abiding friendship. Albertans have bonds of family and friendship and business with Americans that span well over 100 years of shared history. We have always appreciated and shared the American ideals of entrepreneurship and free markets and civil liberties. Albertans, like so many Americans, also feel a strong sense of identity and are fiercely independent, as our fellow Canadians are well aware. But let there be no mistake, as independent as we are, Albertans are strong and loyal Canadians. Thousands of Albertans have lost their lives fighting alongside our fellow Canadians to secure and protect our freedoms and our country. And we will not cast those freedoms and loyalties aside in response to the threat of economic pressure from a foreign government, even an historically friendly one. Albertans will decide our own destiny, free of coercion from any government. So today I'm announcing the following measures in response to the actions of the US president. First, I've directed my cabinet to alter our procurement practices to ensure the government of Alberta, along with our agencies, school boards, crown corporations, and all Alberta municipalities, purchase all needed goods and services from Alberta companies, from Canadian companies, and from countries with which Canada has a free trade agreement that is being honored. Second, no further purchases of U.S. alcohol or new VLTs will be permitted through the AGLC until further notice. We'll just have to drink a bit more BC wine and Alberta craft beer and spirits, and that's just fine with us. Third, I'm directing my government to assist our grocers and other retailers with labeling all Canadian products in our stores and ask them to voluntarily purchase their stock from vendors in Alberta, Canada, or countries that we share free trade agreements with that are being honored. Our government will also augment these efforts with a substantial advertising campaign to assist Albertans to more easily access information about where various products on store shelves are from. I understand as well that there's at least 4 apps that have been created in recent weeks and months that can assist Albertans in doing this. And fourth, my government will enter into free trade and labor mobility agreements with every province that is willing to do so. The goal is to have no exceptions, just free trade and free movement of Canadian workers right across our province. I also want to point out that Canada has a secret weapon in this trade conflict with the United States, a trump card, so to speak. And it is located directly under our feet, and it is called Alberta Energy. You see, Alberta happens to have one of the largest deposits of oil and natural gas on the planet. It is significantly larger and far more accessible than the quickly declining oil and gas reserves located in the United States. Whether the US president wishes to admit it or not, the United States not only needs our oil and gas today, they are also going to need it more and more with each passing year once they notice their declining domestic reserves and production are wholly insufficient to keep up with the energy demands of US consumers and industry, let alone having anything left over to export as they do today. We in Alberta would love to increase the amount of oil and gas we send to our southern neighbors, to help solve that problem for them. Currently, they buy about $100 billion a year of highly discounted oil from Alberta, which tens of thousands of U.S. workers and refineries then upgrade into $300 billion worth of value to sell around the world. We have made a lot of Americans very wealthy. It's in both of our countries' best interests to double the amount of Canadian crude moving south. It means more Canadian jobs, and even more American jobs. It means lower fuel prices for consumers and more US and Canadian influence all around the world. New pipeline proposals to take more Alberta oil and natural gas to the United States, given the US president's stated goal of US energy dominance. Stated simply, the US cannot be anything approaching energy dominant without Canada supplying a portion of the oil and gas. It is just a fact. The Alberta government wants to facilitate and to partner with US companies and even the US government to achieve their energy goals. We really would. It is the ultimate win-win scenario for both of our countries as well as our citizens. But how can Alberta actively partner to expand pipeline access to the United States when its president just slapped a 10% tariff on our energy products and is devastating the other industries in our province and our country with a 25% tariff in violation of an agreement that same president signed in his first term in office? And the answer to that is we can't, and we won't. So until our US friends come back to reality, we will focus on efforts and financial means to export one of the largest oil and gas deposits in the world elsewhere. We will look to our own nation's west and east and north coasts. We will partner with industry, provinces, First Nations, and the federal government to build multiple oil and gas pipelines to all of our coasts for the purpose of dramatically increasing Canadian energy sold to Asia and to Europe. And as soon as the US government is prepared to respect our country and to treat us as allies and partners again, we will welcome the opportunity to partner with them to achieve North American energy dominance. Of course, for this strategy to work in Alberta, we will need to see a significant attitude adjustment from many of our fellow Canadian political leaders with respect to the importance of unlocking and exporting Canadian energy around the world. But I'm confident that Canadians want exactly that right now, and that they will elect politicians who share that view, regardless of who they may have supported previously. Alberta is counting on it. No nation on earth has more resource wealth per person than Canada. We have the potential to be an energy and economic juggernaut, able to punch well above our weight class in virtually anything, from energy to manufacturing to technology to military defense. As Canadians, if we're going to survive this dispute with our neighbors in the short term and win in the long term, we must commit to this strategy. No more excuses. It's time to start building pipe, developing resources, and constructing new ports on every coast without further delay. And as for existing oil and gas sent to the United States, Alberta does not and will not support cutting off or taxing Canadian companies on existing energy exports to the United States, and that's for two key reasons. First, doing so will hurt Canadians far worse than Americans should the US retaliate in kind, which they will. The United States retaliation would most especially hurt those in Ontario and Quebec, which still rely on importing fuel from the United States, largely due to the cancellation of the Energy East pipeline project. If we had Energy East, then cutting off or taxing Alberta crude without Energy East, cutting off or taxing Alberta crude going south is utterly self-defeating. But also importantly, US polls are showing that the Trump tariffs, especially against Canada, are not at all popular with the American public, certainly not popular with the stock market. And that unpopularity is growing and will continue to grow daily as these self-destructive tariffs drive up the cost of food and fuel and housing and almost everything else for American consumers. Cutting off energy entirely would make Canada the bad guy for Americans, and we don't want that. We want the Americans to blame their struggles on the actual source of their problems, that being the Trump tariffs. So instead, every Canadian leader should be engaging with the American people, their governors, and members of Congress to use their power and their influence to reverse the tariffs. To that end, I'll be traveling to Houston next week to continue that push. After all, the friendship and bonds between the United States and Canada are far deeper and more lasting than any one person or government. And as upset as we are, Our quarrel should never be with the American people. They are our friends and family. Now, finally, my fellow Albertans, I'm not going to sugarcoat things. The road ahead is very bumpy. If these tariffs continue for months or longer, there will be significant job losses. There will be higher inflation and lost opportunity. And there will be large budget deficits as our government seeks to cushion the blow for Albertans while ensuring that we continue to provide the public services and infrastructure that you and your families rely on. But let me also say that there is not a shred of doubt in my mind that we will prevail. We are a strong and free people. We stick together and we help one another when the going gets tough. We are relentlessly innovative and we find ways to overcome virtually any challenge placed before us. We always find a way, and we will do so again. And oddly enough, this crisis may ultimately result in our province and our country becoming more unified, more prosperous, and more powerful than ever before. Make Alberta and Canada remain forever strong and free. And thank you for that. And now I'd like to turn things over to Minister Mike Ellis for an update on our interdiction patrol teams.
Well, thanks, Premier. Certainly a pleasure to be alongside Premier Danielle Smith, Minister Amory, Minister Dreeshen, MLA Wright, right here in Medicine Hat. I also want to thank Inspector Ken Howdle with the Alberta Sheriffs for joining us here today. After announcing Alberta's swift action to strengthen security along the southern border at the end of last year, I'm pleased to report that we are delivering on that commitment. In the short time since Alberta's government has deployed considerable resources to get boots on the ground as quickly as possible, I'm very proud to announce that today the new Alberta's Sheriff's Interdiction Patrol Team is playing a very key role in our ongoing efforts to stop drugs, gun smuggling, human trafficking, and other illegal border crossing activities. Currently, we have 20 members that have been assigned to the IPT patrol between entry points along Alberta's side of the border, with the remaining 31 to be fully deployed in the coming months. They're already making a very significant difference and an impact on crime that is traveling in both directions. I can assure you that our portion of the border in Canada is secure, as they continue to focus on known hotspots of illegal activity and keeping a watchful eye over anything suspicious. Most of these sheriffs are also trained to conduct commercial vehicle inspections, allowing us to bolster operations at vehicle inspection stations as well as other area highways. Commercial vehicles are commonly used to smuggle these drugs and illegal weapons and, unfortunately, people. Our increased presence at the inspection stations sends a very clear message that cross-border crime will be promptly identified and disrupted. I've said this many times before, Alberta is not and will never be a haven for criminal activity, and the IPT team is helping to ensure this remains so. In short, it's in short time since the IPT was announced, we've made significant progress. The staff secure state-of-the-art equipment, as well as the IPT, which is already making a tangible impact at the border. Hiring for the team remains ongoing. As I've said, we're on track to fill these remaining vacant positions in the coming months. And later this month, we're going to see 14 new members assigned to the patrol the border. We also continue to work with the RCMP as well as the Canadian Border Services, again, to secure our border. We'll continue to source and deploy the technology and resources needed to ensure the IPT can operate effectively. And of course, procurement, as the Premier mentioned, is underway for additional tools and equipment, including drones, night vision technology, and patrol dogs. And we'll be focusing on Canadian suppliers, or essentially not American suppliers when it comes to these procurement processes. Our steadfast focus, of course, on getting IPT boots on the ground is already making a difference in our communities and transportation corridors. For example, recent traffic stops conducted by the IPT members have apprehended drug traffickers, individuals wanted outstanding warrants, and have removed several impaired drivers from the road. In one instance, a stop was conducted involving a vehicle without a province registration with an intervention into human trafficking. which is unfortunately occurring at our border a little too often than we would like. Our government has been tackling the fentanyl crisis with a multi-pronged approach. Not only do we have our teams here at the border, but we also have been working with municipalities right across Alberta to align community peace officers and police of jurisdiction to combat social and civil disorder, and also our alert team, which is doing a phenomenal job, funded by Alberta's government, has been combating organized crime and fentanyl in the province, and we have seen a lot of success with alert, with the removal of fentanyl super labs, and we have responded to President Trump's concerns regarding fentanyl here in Alberta. We are making sure that fentanyl is not an issue. Thanks to the government's $29 million investment in budget 2025 for IPT, we now have more boots on the ground to detect and intervene with these crimes, and I can proudly say that our border here in Alberta is indeed secure. With the swift action to get these boots immediately on the ground and more soon to come, Albertans are going to make sure that we focus on safety and security, and will always be, and this will always be non-negotiable under this government. We're going to continue to do whatever it takes to crack down on illegal activity and that are taking place at our shared border. The work of the public safety is one part to our government's action, and with that, I'd like to invite my good friend, Minister Devin Dreeshen, to the podium to say a few words.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here this afternoon to share what Alberta Transportation and Economic Corridors is doing our part on our southern border with the United States. We are building 3 new vehicle inspection stations near the border to give our sheriffs dedicated facilities to inspect commercial vehicles, whether they are crossing into the United States or coming into Canada. Now, these stations will be located at Highway 1 at Dunmore in Cypress County, Highway 3 at Burmis in the municipality of Crow's Nest Pass, and Highway 4 near Coots in the county of Warner. And we've dedicated $15 million over the next 2 years in Budget 25 for these improvements. Now, these stations will include enhanced lanes for vehicle inspection and new buildings for year-round inspections. This is an added layer in addition to the existing border stations. And we are also working closely with our highway maintenance contractor to add yet another layer of border security. Security doesn't always have to be complicated or high-tech. A lot of it is based on people. And sometimes all that is needed are an extra set of eyes. And that's why Volker Steven, our provincial maintenance contractor along the border, will be training their operators to be on the lookout for irregular activities near the border during their highway maintenance work. Now, Volker has about 50 operators that work along the border, and they will now be trained to look for and report any suspicious border activity. And I'd like to thank Volker for working with us on this important initiative to secure our border. Now, border security is a priority, and we're doing our part to improve surveillance through these new vehicle inspection stations and with our highway maintenance contractors. Both of these efforts will support Alberta's interdiction patrol team, and we look forward to doing our part in boosting law enforcement as we work to secure Alberta's international border from illegal entry, drugs, and guns. Thank you very much, and right now I'd like to invite Alberta's Justice Minister Mickey Amery to the podium. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Minister Dreeshen. It's certainly a pleasure to be here to join Premier Smith, Minister Ellis, Minister Dreeshen, Justin Wright, for today's update on how Alberta's border security plan is curbing illegal activities at the Alberta-US border. Along with the border security measures that Minister Ellis has been describing, Alberta's government committed in December to creating a 2-kilometer deep zone to be designated as essential infrastructure under the Critical Infrastructure Defence Act. I'm pleased to report that we moved quickly to fulfill that commitment. At the end of January, we amended the Critical Infrastructure Defence Regulation to designate a critical border zone north of the entire Alberta United States border as essential infrastructure. The Critical Infrastructure Defence Act protects essential infrastructure from trespassing, interference, and damage that could cause significant public safety concerns, social, economic, and environmental consequences. The Act allows Cabinet to make regulations that prescribe buildings, structures, devices, or other things as essential infrastructure. This regulation-making power allows government to respond quickly to emerging events and needs. And a quick response is exactly what our current situation calls for. The international border is critical to Alberta's security, economy, and society. Designating a 2-kilometer border zone as essential infrastructure helps protect public safety and Alberta's economic prosperity by giving peace officers additional tools to address trespassing, interference, and damage. I would like to be clear that any individual who is legally working, living, or traveling in this area may continue to do so. The Critical Infrastructure Defense Regulation will apply when people have no lawful right, justification, or excuse to be in an area. I would like to be also clear that the government does not direct law enforcement on when or how to enforce the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act. It is up to law enforcement to assess the situation and act accordingly. Under the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act, a peace officer may arrest any person who the peace officer finds willfully entering onto essential infrastructure without a lawful right, justification, or excuse. This option is just one of a number of legal tools that the interdiction patrol teams disposal that provides the ability to make an arrest. And it further ensures that the team is well equipped to carry out its important duties. Public safety and Alberta's economic prosperity remain this government's 2 highest priorities. Enhancing security in the area near the international border is a crucial step in addressing both of these priorities, and Alberta's government has been working quickly to protect our border. However, more needs to be done to increase public safety and crack down on the illegal activity that is happening. In February, I, along with the Premier, called on the federal government to repeal Bill C-5 in full and reintroduce mandatory minimum sentences for Controlled Drug and Substances Act offenses. If the federal government refuses to take these actions, we call on them to provide us with the federal funding required for Alberta to take over all prosecutions under the Controlled Drug and Substances Act. With the proposed transfer in federal funding, we are confident that we can meet the demands of these prosecutions should the federal government continue to fail to do so. Our prosecutors have, and they always will, answer the call to ensure that Albertans' safety is at their top priority. Last week, Budget 2025 was introduced, and if passed, will represent a 5% increase to Alberta's Crown Prosecution Service funding. This increase will support recruitment and retention of additional Crown prosecutors so they can continue to effectively manage caseloads and ensure viable criminal cases are prosecuted. This increase will also support the creation of a human trafficking unit, which will be tasked with prosecuting human trafficking related charges and support police and victims of crime. Whether we are strengthening border security, calling on the federal government to toughen its approach to crime, or investing in the Alberta Crown Prosecution Service, we will continue to make sure that those convicted of criminal offenses are held accountable for their actions so that Albertans can continue to feel safe in their communities. Thank you. I'll introduce Inspector Howdle now. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Minister. I am pleased to share that we have significantly strengthened the security at Alberta's southern border. I'd first like to extend my sincere thanks to the RCMP and Canada Border Services Agency for their continued work enhancing the safety and security of our border in coordination and collaboration with the Interdiction Patrol Team. These collective efforts have played an essential role in many successes that we've seen since the start of the year and which we expect to see in the future. As Minister Ellis mentioned, we are rapidly building out the Interdiction Patrol Team with a goal of staffing 51 specialized positions in the coming months. By mid-April, we expect to have 34 sheriffs assigned to the team to patrol entry points along the Alberta side of the border. Recruitment for support staff positions, including dispatchers and analysts, is underway. Many of these sheriff positions will be drawn from Sheriff Highway Patrol, whose members have extensive experience investigating criminal offenses and specialized training in conducting commercial vehicle inspections which have already been proven to be crucial in our progress. Currently, all access points, township roads, range roads, south of and including Highway 3 to the Canada-US border are being actively patrolled by the IPT. Equipment procurement remains a critical ongoing part of this team's success. Our members need and will have specialized gear required to ensure operational agility and accuracy through the southern border region. In addition to night vision equipment to assist the team in their 24/7 operations, work is underway to procure all-weather drones and with infrared capability, as well as trained canines. This includes training for members from within the team to fill specialized roles such as dedicated drone pilots and dog handlers. Having significantly increased our capacity since the new year, we are already seeing positive results of our bolstered patrol presence. As of today, the Interdiction Patrol Team members operate in 2 mobile, 7-member patrol teams deployed mainly from Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, and Burmis. 6 other members work in teams of 2 deployed at the vehicle inspection stations located on Dunmore on Highway 1, Burmis on Highway 3, and Coots on Highway 4. These teams operate in staggered shifts to increase operational coverage at the stations. The instances of criminal and illegal activity uncovered since the Interdiction Patrol Team began operations speak to the need for continued vigilance and swift-acting law enforcement, as well as the effectiveness of increased and enhanced vehicle inspection capacity. Recent traffic stops conducted during the team's interdiction and border security patrol duties have led to the apprehension of 3 separate individuals in the possession of cocaine with the intent to traffic. In another instance, a stop involving a Quebec registered vehicle led to the discovery of a person being trafficked. As a result, an investigation has since been opened and remains ongoing. So far, traffic stops have taken 34 impaired drivers off our highways and roads and led to the apprehension of individuals wanted on outstanding warrants. Additionally, team members also continue to provide operational support to the RCMP and CBSA, to date having assisted with investigations related to 4 northbound vehicles that failed to stop at border entry points for inspection. These instances are clear proof that the Interdiction Patrol Team's presence in the area is playing an important role in both disrupting cross-border criminal activity and maintaining safety and order that surrounding communities depend on. The IPT reflects Alberta's steadfast commitment to combating illegal activities and ensuring security along our shared border. As implementation continues to progress, we can expect further successes as Alberta sheriffs work diligently to confront the problem of cross-border crime. Thank you.
Thank you, Ministers, Premier, Inspector. Premier, if we come back to the mic, we'll start off our media Q&A now. We'll start off with questions in the room here at the mic before we move over to the phones. And I'll take the first at the mic. And just a reminder, we'll be taking 1 question and 1 follow-up. Go ahead.
Jordan Cannigan with CTV News. I have a question for the Premier, and then perhaps Minister Ellis wants to talk about this as well. We heard a lot today from both the President and the Press Secretary for the President talking about fentanyl and the issues the United States is having with that. The Press Secretary, for instance, today saying that there's been a 2,000% increase in the amount of fentanyl coming from Canada into the United States. I don't know where those numbers are coming from. I don't know if you can dispute those numbers, but how confident are you that the actions that you're taking here in Alberta will address that and at least appease some of those questions that the President seems to be having?
Sure. I mean, I don't say it lightly when I say our border is secure. Now, look, do we have a fentanyl crisis in North America? For sure. As previously noted by the RCMP, we have over 4,000 organized crime groups that have set up shop in Canada. We have, as confirmed by the RCMP, we have become a net exporter of fentanyl, so that is a concern. However, I can tell you that our Alberta law enforcement response teams have been working very closely with the DEA, as an example, to make sure that that border is secure and that they're stopping the flow of drugs from Canada into the United States. But remember, I've said this before a long time ago, this is a two-way street. There's a lot of drugs that are coming from the United States, especially cocaine, into Canada. There are illegal guns that are coming from the United States into Canada. And there's also the human trafficking, right, that is coming from the United States into Canada. The 4 people, I believe, that were fairly recently caught were not going from Canada into the United States. They were going from the United States into Canada. So I would hope that the president shares with us our concerns regarding the border. Certainly in Alberta, we are doing our part to secure the border. I would certainly ask that the president do his part to secure the border as well.
And maybe if I can ask the Premier to answer that question as well. Yesterday on CNBC, you also talked about how it appeared that the president was moving away perhaps from the fentanyl issue. Today, again, it comes up. A second part of to my question is about the being against export tax and whether Canada should consider that at all. What is Alberta willing to do if the federal government does put in some type of export tax or decide to cut off energy to the U.S.?
Well, an export tax would be a violation of the 1977 Pipeline Treaty. We've committed to not tax the content of energy products going down to the United States. And I would hope that the federal government would abide by Alberta's wishes not to unfairly tax our jurisdiction. I know what an export tax would mean. $150 billion worth of product taxed at 25% would generate $40 billion for Ottawa. That would then be spent on Ottawa's priorities, and I have absolutely no interest. You will notice that when Doug talked about adding a surtax, he wasn't talking about Ottawa adding an export tax that then would be collected by Ottawa to be decided where it was going to be spent by Ottawa. He's adding that tax so that he has the ability to keep those dollars in his own province to be able to defray any of the damage on his own people. So I would say it is not on. It's not been on from the beginning. And you do not demonstrate that you are a reliable supplier of energy products to our most important trading partner by acting in that kind of erratic way. So there's no circumstance under which I would support an export tax. The other question you had was?
I was just wondering about, it seems to be the goalposts are moving all of the time.
It's not that the goalposts are moving. It's that he has 2 different tariffs that he's charging. One tariff is related to border security and fentanyl, and that's what we're dealing with now with the 2510 tariffs. The other issues that are coming up in the context of trade irritants that will be needed to be discussed in the context of a renegotiated Canada-US free trade agreement. Sometimes when he speaks, he intermingles those two, but there's very clearly a long list of grievances that the US president has. I would put it to you that I think Alberta has done its part in matching the effort that the Americans want to see. And I was just in Coots, and I can tell you, I can affirm what Mike is saying. The issue that we're facing in Alberta at our border appears to be drugs coming up from Canada or from the US into Canada, whether it's cocaine or crystal meth. The issue of migrants seems to be exclusively people coming across from the United States into Canada. A woman in the room said that 2 or 3 times a year she sees families with suitcases. And I asked the room full of about 200 people how many people experience the same, and almost everyone lifted their hand. So there are hundreds of people potentially who are coming across from the United States into Canada, and we are not seeing the same in reverse. So what we are asking for is some recognition that with the additional enforcements we put at the border, our interdiction teams, the sniffer dogs, the vehicle inspection, the drones, and the Black Hawk helicopters, that's a demonstration that we're doing our part. We're wanting the U.S. to match our efforts as well. And let's stamp out the scourge of fentanyl. We all want to eliminate it. But it's going to take a joint effort working collaboratively. And I think some recognition that it is a two-way street.
Thanks, Jordan. We'll go to our next at the mic.
Hi there, Colin Gallant with the Medicine Hat News. You had said that your government was looking through some proposals for several pipelines to the United States, and that eventually, when this is all cleared up, you'd be welcome back that relationship. What would it take in terms of guarantees from the United States that this sort of thing wouldn't just happen again, for you to move ahead on those pipeline proposals?
Well, I think we need to have the same kind of tariff-free relationship on the bulk of our goods that we had prior to March the 4th. I mean, when you look at the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement, there are some areas that are tariff, but it's about a 96% tariff-free relationship. And I think that there's a few things, obviously, that the American administration wants to address in future negotiations. But that's the the forum to address them, not by unilaterally tearing up agreements that we had that we thought we'd negotiated in good faith. So I gather there's been some movement today. Before I was just monitoring Twitter, which you seem to have to do every 2 hours to figure out what is happening on this issue. But it seems like the three major American auto manufacturers have convinced the U.S. president that they would shut down in 8 days if they didn't get some reprieve from the auto tariffs. And so it sounds to me like that has also been moved a month. So those are the kind of things that demonstrate to me that there is the ability for our allies and friends in the United States, among the elected representatives, consumer groups, as well as industry groups, to make the case about this strong relationship. We had some success already in making that case on energy resources. It's why there's a lower tariff on energy. It sounds like there's been some success on the auto sector in getting to that point as well. And I think it's up to all of us. We have to, the next big issue, of course, is going to be on food products, manufactured goods, intermediate goods. But that's what I would like to see. I think we are all working for a virtually tariff-free relationship, and I hope we can get there sooner rather than later.
Okay, and just to follow up, somewhat related to interprovincial trade barriers, you said you're open to all issues, I suppose. Now, a lot of these in the past have been pretty provincial jurisdiction areas that you've held pretty tight. It's sort of a foundation of your government to increase provincial jurisdiction. And if you're asking the federal government and other provinces to come to the table on pipelines, is there something you're willing to maybe step back or work with or move on in order to make that negotiation work?
The only issues that where we have unilaterally eliminated interprovincial trade barriers faster and more fulsomely than any other province. So the areas where we still have some additional protections are around hazardous goods, the issues of royalties, and there's 7 professions where we have a higher level of training. I'll give you an example. We allow dental hygienists to do anesthesia. Anesthesia is very dangerous. So you need to have extra training for that. And so there is a little bit of work we need to do on the 7 professions where we have a higher level of training, but there's no reason why we can't have people come here and work and then be able to get that extra training. They need to do those extra services. I think those are things that can be overcome. But there are very few areas where we have barriers. We actually have
electricity would be one example.
We have no barriers on electricity. It's the other provinces that do. We're the only province that has a free enterprise system on electricity.
But getting that agreement would involve some sort of major negotiation, wouldn't it?
Well, we would just ask everyone else to. I mean, I think that's a question for other premiers because they're the ones who don't have a free enterprise system for electricity. We do. We have a multitude of companies that are generators. We've got a free enterprise system where different companies are offering transmission, distribution, as well as retail. So anyone is allowed to come here and go through our process to propose. We don't have barriers there.
Thank you. We're going to take one more from the mic and then take a few questions from the phone.
Adam McVicker with Global News Calgary. Hi, Premier.
Hi.
One of the aspects you mentioned there at the start was about some of the steps, number one, procurement, but also with AGLC and alcohol and VLTs. How significant of a step is this, and how will Albertans maybe notice a step like this here in this province?
Well, I can tell you that there's $292 million worth of liquor products, U.S. liquor products sold in Alberta in the 23-24 fiscal year, generated $84 million in markup revenue for the province. And so if you look at that quantum here and then just imagine that we're about 12% of the population, all of the other provinces are doing the same. So I would suggest that it's probably in total somewhere between $2 and $3 billion of impact across a multitude of providers of these products. And we do know that these are the kind of things in the past that has gotten various producers to call their Congress representatives and put some pressure. And so that's part of what we're doing. What we did in identifying some of our issues in supporting, first off, the $30 billion worth of tariffs, it was identifying those products which are easily replaceable with other products so that it does not inconvenience Canadian consumers or doesn't end up pricing them out. And I would say that all of these products that AGLC produces, that there are reasonable equivalents from Canadian jurisdictions as well as other jurisdictions that honor the free trade agreements we have with them.
And just as a follow-up related to the border,
Yeah.
how many of these plans have been ongoing, and How many are now in response to this tariff threat at this point?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Appreciate the question. Look, the Premier put this in my mandate letter. We had been working on this for quite some time. His meaning President Trump's maybe original tweet had kind of maybe expedited the process, we'll say. But, we'd been planning this for some time, which is why we were able to get these folks trained and deployed and out in probably sooner than anywhere else in Canada. Most of these officers have commercial vehicle training, interdiction training. So really it became more of a kind of an operational / union thing where we're just making sure that we're getting deployed out there. But yeah, it was not in direct response to the president. We've always had concerns regarding the border. And as one of your previous colleagues has stated, the reason why the Premier put in there is because we had concerns in Alberta that illegal drugs, illegal guns, and human trafficking was coming from the border into Alberta. And so we wanted to assist the CBSA and assist the National RCMP to try to put a stop to that. Thanks.
Thank you. And we'll take some questions from the phone now. Operator, could you put through our first caller, please?
The first question comes from Chris Barco of the Calgary Herald. Your line is already open.
Hi, Premier. Thanks for taking my question. You said earlier that you've been approached with several new pipeline proposals to take Alberta oil and gas into the United States. What will be your approach to these projects, whether they are proposals like Keystone XL or Enbridge's current plans to increase its mainline capacity, given the fact that tariffs are in place right now?
We did a joint announcement, as you probably saw, at the beginning of January with Enbridge. They have a very comprehensive package of proposals that, if all of them went ahead, would result in a significant increase in the amount of oil they're able to take to the United States. There's also South Bow, which has the previous infrastructure from the Keystone from TC Energy on the oil side. I know that they are contemplating a proposal as well. And there's a number of American partners that could potentially partner with our company. So I have a proposal that I'm readying to present to the U.S. administration at a time when these tariffs are removed, to let them know that we are supportive in working towards increasing the amount of oil going to the U.S. I think with the combination of proposals I've seen, we could potentially see an increase of 2 million barrels or more per day increase by 2030. But none of those conversations can happen while we have 25% tariffs on our food producers, on our manufacturers, on our chemical producers, on all of the other consumer group or consumables that are tariffed under the current situation. So I think there's a quid pro quo. If we want to work together as partners, then we've got to be partners, and we've got to go back to having a tariff-free relationship.
Just to follow up, you've preached consistently an approach about diplomacy with the United States over the last couple of months. Do you think that has failed? Do you think that has to shift now?
No, it's been successful. The fact that we saw a 10% tariff rate instead of 25% is a recognition, I think, that energy resources, whether it's oil and gas or critical minerals or electricity, are vital components of U.S. success. That's what we're arguing, is that if you want to be able to exert American influence internationally, geopolitically, through oil exports, you need Canadian oil to be able to backfill so that American consumers are protected. We very successfully made the case that there were a multitude of refineries that would shut down potentially with 25% tariffs, and it would certainly cause an increase in the cost of fuel. I just saw a story today that even 10% tariffs are going to increase the cost of gasoline by 30 cents a gallon in some jurisdictions. I think that message was heard loud and clear. It could have potentially been almost 3 times higher than that. So I would say that we've been able to be successful on making some of those arguments. I think we can make them for food. I think we can make them for intermediate products, but it does take us working with our American counterparts in business as well as in various levels of elected office to press the point for us. I have confidence that we can be successful on that. Just look at what happened today with a reprieve on auto tariffs. I think the the more the stock market responds in a negative fashion, the more consumers demonstrate that they're going to be hurt, the more industry voices that speak up. I think that that's going to get us to a place where we can get to where I think we really need to be, which is renegotiating the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement and dealing with some of these irritants so that both countries can get on to other issues.
Thanks, Chris. And we just have time for 2 more questions. We're going to take 2 more from the phones. Operator, could you put through our next question, please?
Your next question comes from Rahim Mohammed of National Post. Your line is already open.
Hi, Premier. This question is for the Premier. So you and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick were both on CNBC yesterday. I don't know if it was back-to-back segments. I think you were a bit earlier. In Lutnick's interview, he seemed to suggest that for the U.S. to back off on tariffs on Canada to Mexico, he wouldn't just need to see improved outcomes at the border, but he'd be looking for a statistical decrease in autopsy deaths from fentanyl. Do you think that's a reasonable bar to hold Canada, and for that matter, Mexico to? Do you think Canada can, be held responsible for fentanyl deaths in the United States, even ones that can't be linked to Canadian products?
I guess you'd have to believe that there's no organized crime or cartels operating in America if that was the case. I mean, it seems to me that when we look at where the opioid crisis began, it began because of a pharmaceutical company being irresponsible in marketing it. And I'm talking about Purdue Pharma, which has had a multitude of lawsuits filed against it. So I would say that a lot of this problem started in the United States and it's morphed into being an international problem. But the Americans have to take responsibility for the fact that they are also a net exporter of cocaine, crystal meth, and they are responsible for this as well. Like I can't stop all the deaths from happening in the United States. They've got to do some of the work on that too. We can certainly decrease them. As we've demonstrated in Alberta, our approach with our recovery-oriented system of care, getting people on Suboxone and Sublocade, putting people into treatment when they're in corrections facilities, having recovery communities that we're continuing to grow, and all of those various ways of being able to support people in recovery has reduced our opioid deaths by 40%. And so that's after 6 hard years of work. So I think if the answer is going to be no one ever dies from any type of drug, if that's going to be the bar, then I think we're going to have we have to have a bit of a reality check. We all have to be doing our part, but I think the Americans also have to accept that some of this is their responsibility too.
And also yesterday, Premier Doug Ford, unrelated follow-up, indicated that he's had conversations with your Saskatchewan counterpart, Scott Moe, about leveraging Saskatchewan potash and uranium as part of a Team Canada response to tariffs. Have you had similar discussions with Premier Moe? And do you think that this would be a good course of action, given the sorts of promises Donald Trump has been making to American farmers about their prosperity?
I would say that there's 2 ways that we can address the issue of the trade deficit. That seems to be one of the other things that keeps coming up. The Americans seem to be very concerned that, depending on their calculations, that we do not buy as much stuff from them as they buy from us. I don't think that's true, quite frankly. I think if you take out oil and gas, which they clearly need as a raw material, we actually buy more goods and services from the United States, $58 billion more. So I think if you did that calculation, we come out pretty good on that. And so, but if there's some desire to see that be zero, even when you include energy, I guess as I said, there's only 2 options. We figure out ways to buy more from the United States, and I think we can. I mean, I think we need to do more military investment. We can do more procurement that way. We need to build icebreakers. There's lots of components that go into military material that we can also purchase. And so I think that there is a way for us to bridge our NATO gap and buy more from the Americans and also reduce that trade deficit. The other option is we sell them less. We sell them less oil, we sell them less gas, we sell them less critical minerals, we sell them less aluminum, we sell them less nickel, we sell them less uranium, and that's another pathway that we can go down. But I don't think, quite frankly, that is the direction that is good for either of our 2 nations. And so I would far prefer to have a constructive conversation about how we can increase the amount of bilateral trade both ways.
Thank you. And we have time for one last question. We're going to take one more from the phones. Operator, could you put through our next caller, please?
Your next question comes from Robert Tuttle of Bloomberg News. Your line is already open.
Yes, hi, Premier. I just want to ask you on the issue. I know you said no to tax, export tax, no to cutting off energy, but would you contemplate at all, or would you rule out any kind of curtailment in oil exports, just a curtailment of any kind, even if this thing escalates?
I don't know that that's necessary. I mean, a couple things. As I mentioned, we can always choose to sell our products to other markets. And so the Enbridge line, as a for instance, they transport 3.5 million barrels of our oil all the way to the Gulf Coast. If the Americans don't want to buy it, then we can sell it to other trading partners. We could sell it to India. We could sell it to Spain. We could sell it to other countries that have heavy oil refineries. If that's what they'd like us to do, I've already told them I'm happy to sell our product somewhere else if they don't want to buy it. We can also do the same thing with Trans Mountain. Trans Mountain, the bulk of the product is going to the United States because the Americans don't have pipelines to their west coast. And so California and Washington and Oregon are cut off. And so they're getting Canadian oil out of Trans Mountain Pipeline in order to be able to feed those refineries. If they don't want that, then I guess we could also, as I say, redirect that to other jurisdictions who do want it. If that's the conversation they want to have, then we can have that conversation. But I don't see any reason why our producers and our Alberta ratepayers should be penalized. I think if we've got a valuable product, then let's sell it to those who want it. And let's try to find a way to get those to new markets.
Okay, and also on the issue of, you said right now we're halting anything on pipelines into the U.S. while these tariffs go on, but you also said you want to get more oil to the coasts, but north, east, west, and north. What specifically can Alberta do given the regulatory challenges and the amount? I mean, there have been talk of an energy emergency, declaring something like that. I mean, and even if you did get rid of all these hurdles, nothing would be built for a number of years. I mean, what do you envision in regard to building such pipelines or getting more oil to the coast?
I can tell you there's a real spirit of collaboration among the premiers, and it's a really constructive table that we've had at the Council of the Federation. We've had some pretty honest conversations about it. So I would say that we've already demonstrated that it's been a little rocky, but we did demonstrate that there was a pathway to getting Trans Mountain twinned. There was a pathway to getting Coastal GasLink built. There's several other LNG projects that are on the go that I would like to continue working with Premier David Eby on. And I just saw a new proposal for either a Northern Gateway 2.0 or a spur line coming off of the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Those are the kind of things we talk about with British Columbia. I know that Nunavut and Northwest Territories are collaborating on trying to get Grays Bay developed, and that could be an avenue for us to not only get infrastructure for rail and roads up there, but also infrastructure for pipelines. So that's a second project that we'd be looking at. I know that Ranch Pillay is very keen on trying to develop an A2A option where we could go up through the Yukon into Alaska. That's another potential for us to consider in collaboration with our Yukon friends. We've got shored up infrastructure at Churchill that Premier Wab Kinew has developed. That becomes another option potentially with economic corridors that Devin Dreeshen negotiated with Saskatchewan and Manitoba. James Bay is another way that you could get a spur line going up into the Hudson Bay that would allow for us, especially with icebreakers that we could get from Quebec, to be able to clear the way to have a pathway to go to Europe. And there is a potential for an Energy East 2.0 as long as it doesn't go through Montreal. If we can find another route that could go through an area that is a lot more open to that and open up Quebec's substantial natural gas resources, there's lots of opportunity. And I can tell you that I don't think I've ever seen so much cross-country enthusiasm for talking about restarting some of these projects. The polling that I saw suggests that the support for things like Energy East is well over 70% in every region of the country. And so I think that the next federal government is only going to win if they commit to building more of this kind of infrastructures to the benefit of all Canadians. So I think there's been a sea change in attitude.
Perfect. And I think we have one time for a quick question from the mic in the room here.
Great. Annie from Radio Canada. I was wondering, do you have any financial aid that you plan to do to help Albertan or small company affected by the tariff? I'm talking about the farmers, the beef producer.
Right. So remember how tariffs work. They're levied by the federal government. So all the money goes to Ottawa. So with 25% tariffs on $30 billion worth of goods going up to $155 billion of goods, depending on how long those last, that could generate potentially, $30 to $40 billion that go to Ottawa. So Ottawa has the means to be able to support the industry, whether it's through an enhanced employment insurance program, which they've already committed to do. They are going to support job sharing so that it's easier for workers to stay employed. That's one thing that they have advanced. We're going to make sure that we are staying close to our industry and getting them to tell us the kind of things that they would need for support. A couple of the things we might need is liquidity support. So if the federal government can offer some low-income bridge loans, either to maintain operations or to help transition into new markets or new products. We've also heard as well investing in better export infrastructure. If this is going to be a long-term approach, then we're going to need more ports, we're going to need more rail, we're going to need more roads. I would think that that would be one of the things that would help our business. New technologies as well, so being able to, having Ottawa assist industry and being able to adopt new technologies that will also allow them to access new markets. Market expansion, of course, they have mechanisms to do that through things like the Export Development Corporation and BDC, so we would hope to advocate for some programs like that. And then additional worker support if we find that we're seeing layoffs. And so I would, what we're doing is we've got a number of industry tables that are telling us feedback, and then we'll be advocating for some of those federal dollars to be able to come and support those industries.
But do you plan to put some money on the table to help Alberta?
We've put money on the table. We have a $5 billion deficit we're forecasting, including $1.2 billion worth of tax cuts that we're giving directly to our citizens so that they have $1,500 per family able to be able to ward off some of the tariff threats. So we've put $5 billion on the table, ready to help.
Perfect. Thank you, Annie. And that's all the time we have for questions today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And just to the media in the room, there is an opportunity to film some B-roll at the Dunmore Vehicle Inspection Station, which we're headed to next. Again, thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Well, bonjour, good morning. I'm Tanya Furr, Minister of Arts, Culture and Status of Women. Bonjour, je m'appelle Tanya Furr et je suis ministre des Arts, de la Culture et de la Condition Féminine. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that Calgary is on Treaty 7 territory, home to the Blackfoot Confederacy of the Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani, as well as the Tsuut'ina and Stoney Nakoda nations of Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Goodstoney. I also acknowledge the Métis people of Alberta who have a deep connection with this land. Thank you to, je remercie, Heather Innes, Executive Director of the Provincial Archives of Alberta, Heather Innes, Directrice Générale des Archives Provinciales de l'Alberta, Claudette de Roy, President of Société Historique Francophone de l'Alberta, Claudette D. Roy, Présidente de la Société Historique Francophone de l'Alberta. Thank you both. Merci for joining us today. And thank you to La Cité des Rocheuses for hosting us for this announcement. I'm thrilled to share exciting updates about our ongoing efforts to expand and enhance French language services for Albertans. French-speaking Albertans have shaped our province's history and identity for centuries. Their contributions have enriched Alberta's cultural landscape in countless ways throughout our history, and you continue to do so today. For many, learning and accessing services in French is not just about convenience. Pour bien des jeunes, l'apprentissage et l'accès à des services en français n'est pas seulement une question de commodité. It is a reflection of your identity and heritage. C'est une question d'identité et de patrimoine. That's why today I'm pleased to announce that Alberta's government is taking another significant step to ensure essential French language services continue to grow and evolve while preserving Alberta's Francophone heritage for future generations. Alberta's government is investing over $4 million to further strengthen French language services, ensuring that Francophones across the province have access to the support they need in the language of their choice. This funding is an essential part of our ongoing commitment to implement Alberta's French Policy Action Plan. Efforts span various sectors, including supporting Francophone nonprofit organizations, enhancing cultural services, and providing health and justice resources in French. With more than 260,000 Albertans who speak French, it remains the most spoken language in Alberta after English. Il y a plus de 260 000 Albertaines et Albertans qui parlent français, et le français est la langue parlée le plus couramment après l'anglais dans notre province. Exploring our history and culture in the language that feels most natural helps us connect more deeply with our roots and better understand our legacy. This investment makes that experience possible, offering more families, children, and all Albertans the opportunity to discover and connect with Alberta's Francophone heritage. Our government is investing in key initiatives that will continue to support education, research, and cultural projects. For example, the Provincial Archives of Alberta recently translated nearly 200 records, making them publicly accessible, and added bilingual staff to support research on Alberta's Francophone history. The Société Historique Francophone de l'Alberta preserves this heritage, providing tools and resources that help future generations connect with their past and shape their own history. This funding also supports educational initiatives such as French language school and public programs at the Royal Alberta Museum, the RAM, along with educational and audio guides at the Reynolds Museum and the Royal Tyrrell Museum. Alberta's government is making sure all Albertans and visitors can explore the province's history, culture, and science entirely in the language of their choice. Le gouvernement de l'Alberta veille à ce que tous les Albertains et les visiteurs de la province puissent découvrir l'histoire, la culture et la science d'ici dans la langue de leur choix. We are also working hard to continue increasing access and availability of essential government services in French. Alberta's French Policy Action Plan includes more than 100 actions that strengthen French language education, translate key documents and expand interpretation services, enhance bilingual court services, continue French language career and employment services, and much more. And that's just the beginning. We're committed to keeping the momentum going. French language and culture has always been woven into the fabric of Alberta's history, and we want to ensure it remains a vibrant part of our future. This month, we are celebrating Mois de la Francophonie Albertaine, Alberta Francophonie Month. Nous célébrons ce mois-ci le Mois de la Francophonie Albertaine. It's a time to appreciate the invaluable contributions of French-speaking Albertans in our province. By celebrating and supporting Alberta's Francophonie, we're not only recognizing the province's heritage, but also ensuring that every Albertan receives the services and experiences they need to live, work, and raise their families here. If you speak French or are learning the language, I encourage you to explore the programs and services now available to you, especially through alberta.ca. Si vous parlez français ou que vous apprenez cette langue, je vous encourage à prendre connaissance des programmes et des services qui vous sont offerts, particulièrement sur le site alberta.ca. And now, I'm happy to invite Heather Innes, the Executive Director of the Provincial Archives of Alberta, to share a few words with us. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Minister. Good morning. One of our goals at the Provincial Archives of Alberta is to document and preserve the history of the people of this province. We have had a long-standing commitment to the Francophone community. We now preserve the length of 10 football fields of text, film, photographs, audio and video records, and stories that document the Francophone experience in Alberta. As the premier custodian of records for the Francophones in this province, we take pride in our efforts to make these records accessible to Francophone communities and to anyone who wants to learn about Francophone culture, history, French language, and the Francophone experience in the West. Thanks to this action plan funding, our bilingual archivist and archival technician continue to make these records available to Francophones not just in Alberta, but throughout Canada and internationally. Provincial Archives staff provide reference services in French and create French language finding aids so that patrons can seek relevant records, both in person at the archives and online. This year, the archives has digitized and made nearly 100,000 pages of records from the Oblates of Mary Immaculate available, much of which chronicles the lives of Francophones in our province. As the Francophone population in Alberta has grown, so has our commitment to the community through tours and workshops that highlight their heritage and history. Our goal is to promote a deeper understanding of the archives and emphasize the importance of preserving personal and family records. This past year, we have worked with La Société Historique Francophone de l'Alberta, the Comité Franco-Queer de l'Ouest, and also with Quisqueya Institute Kayanu to deliver workshops for the French Afro-Caribbean community. Later this month, we will be hosting a French language tour of the Provincial Archives for Les Rendez-vous de la Francophonie to demonstrate how we acquire, preserve, and make records of the Francophone communities available to everyone in the province. Thank you, and I'd like to invite Claudette Roy.
Madame la ministre, distingués invités, chers membres de la communauté, c'est avec fierté que je prends la parole au nom de la Société historique francophone de l'Alberta pour souligner un investissement essentiel dans la protection et le rayonnement de l'histoire des francophones en Alberta. D'abord, Un grand merci à l'honorable Tanya Feu, ministre des Arts, de la Culture et de la Condition féminine. Votre engagement témoigne une reconnaissance précieuse de la part francophone à l'histoire et à l'identité de notre province. L'histoire francophone en Alberta est une histoire de résilience et de persistance. Depuis plus de 270 ans, le français a toujours eu sa place ici, enrichi aujourd'hui par les nouveaux arrivants qui dynamisent nos communautés. Cette mémoire collective, portée dans nos familles, nos écoles et nos institutions, doit être protégée, valorisée et partagée. L'investissement annoncé aujourd'hui est un pas important. L'accès aux services en français est essentiel à la vitalité de nos communautés et leur développement repose sur l'engagement d'acteurs communautaires, culturels et éducatifs. Lorsqu'on facilite l'accès à l'histoire en français à travers la conservation des archives, les expositions et les initiatives numériques et scolaires, on permet aux Albertains de se réapproprier leur passé et d'en assurer la transmission. Je pense notamment au travail mené pour documenter l'histoire des Noirs francophones en Alberta. Grâce à un partenariat avec la Société Kayanou et une collaboration étroite avec les archives provinciales de l'Alberta, dont je salue la présence de Heather Innes, nous rassemblons des témoignages et des artefacts qui racontent les parcours, luttes et contributions de ces communautés trop peu documentées. Speaking of history also, les initiatives montrent bien notre histoire, qu'elle est vivante, qu'elle est essentielle et à la diversité de notre province. And here is where I want to insert a small comment in English. Speaking about our rich history, I would be remiss if I did not mention that in a year or so, La CFA will be celebrating its 100th anniversary as an association, and part of that will be, of course, remembering the long past, more than 100 years of Francophone history and contributions in Alberta. So that's something interesting and important that will be coming up soon in the history. Alors, parlant justement de notre histoire vivante et essentielle à la diversité, en réunissant chercheurs, services et communautés, nous donnons une voix à ceux et celles qui ont façonné l'Alberta. Mais ces efforts nécessitent des ressources et un engagement durable. Préserver notre mémoire, ce n'est pas seulement protéger les archives et les documents, c'est affirmer la place des francophones dans le récit collectif de l'Alberta. C'est rappeler que nous avons contribué, que nous contribuons toujours et que notre histoire mérite d'être conservée, connue et célébrée. Nous sommes heureux de voir ces investissements concrets qui soutiennent cette vision. En ce mois de la francophonie albertaine, ce geste rappelle l'importance de célébrer et de renforcer notre héritage commun. Encore une fois, merci Madame la Ministre et à toutes les personnes qui rendent ces avancées possibles. Ensemble, continuons de faire vivre l'histoire et la culture francophone en Alberta. Merci.
All right, thank you. That brings us to the end of the formal portion of our conference. Now we will move into any media questions and the answer portion. Just a reminder, it will be one question and one follow-up, and I'd just like to ask that media, you identify yourself, your outlet, and let us know whom you're directing your question to. We'll start in the room and then we'll go to the reporters online afterwards, should we have any.
Hi, Laurence with Radio Canada. I'm just going to take 1 second to get up. So this $4 million, I'm understanding, is to implement the Alberta French Policy Action Plan. So can you clarify, is the amount since 2024 to 2028? Because the action plan was announced and started in 2024 and will continue until 2028.
Merci pour votre question. It's for this budget year. So budget 2025, if passed, is maintaining that level of funding. So it's for this budget year. So it's not spread out over several years. It's dedicated to this budget year. And as you mentioned, it's to continue implementing the French Policy Action Plan, the important initiatives and making sure that we're providing those key services in all areas, but particularly areas like health and education and justice in French.
Okay. Not a follow-up, but just to make sure I understand it, it is additional $4 million.
Yes, it's $4.1 million. Yes, for this calendar year. So,
Perfect.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help but notice, there's Francophone school programs. Can you clarify a bit more what that entails, what kind of funding they will be getting and for what? Is it to have more students? Is it actual education funding or is it specific programs?
So it's across a wide range of different programs and services. And what we can do is we'll make sure we follow up. We can provide you some specifics with some of the specific examples and resources and institutions that where the funding is provided for. We'll get that to you today.
Okay, perfect.
Merci.
Any immediate?
We'll take the next question.
Okay. Hi, I'm Arzuma with Radio Canada. So to what extent do federal and provincial language policies in Alberta reflect differing priorities regarding immigration, integration, and the preservation of Canada's linguistic duality?
Yeah, I think it's very important, as Claudette spoke about. I was actually intrigued when she was speaking because I was like, I understood a lot of what she was saying, but you may be my new French teacher. But with pleasure for me as well. Claudette, if I understood correctly, she was talking about preserving the history of the Francophone is one of resilience and persistence, and the importance of telling that story and preserving that history, not only for the Francophonie that helped build this province and celebrating and maintaining and recognizing their culture, their history, their heritage, but as you point out, for the new Canadians, we have coming from so many different countries who speak French. In having the honor of having this position, I've been able to attend many different events and to meet the incredible folks that are coming from so many countries that speak French. And Alberta has the third highest French-speaking population after Quebec. I don't think a lot of people know that, and it's expected to grow faster than any other province over the next couple of years. So very important that we continue to provide those, recognize the past, but continue to provide supports and resources for the growing population.
Thank you.
Merci.
And we'll take the next question in the room. No? I'll quickly just see if we have anyone on the lines. Operator? No? Okay, then yeah, go right ahead.
Je peux vous poser une question, s'il vous plaît. En fait, peut-être pour la communauté francophone, pour qu'ils aient une idée, vous avez parlé de projets de recherche, de recherche pour montrer la résilience de la communauté et tout. Est-ce qu'il y a un projet que vous avez en tête, que vous pourriez mentionner, dont vous êtes particulièrement fier ou enthousiaste, qui est à venir, juste pour qu'on ait un exemple concret?
Bien, nous avons accueilli avec intérêt un projet possible qui va se faire avec le Royal Alberta Museum, qui a lancé un appel d'offres il y a à peu près, 6 semaines, pour des idées d'un projet temporaire pour souligner, je crois que c'est pour souligner l'anniversaire le 100e anniversaire de la CFA. Évidemment, je peux pas m'empêcher pour te dire, Madame la ministre, peut-être un jour on aura une exposition permanente, mais c'est à discuter. Mais c'est ça. Ça, c'est un des projets. Et on n'a pas tous les résultats de cet appel d'offres-là, mais on entend dire qu'il y a eu une réponse intéressante de la part des francophones. Alors, reste à voir. Alors ça, c'est quelque chose que nous voyons venir avec intérêt et satisfaction, si on veut.
Je ne peux pas m'empêcher de vous demander, je ne sais pas si vous avez la réponse, mais quand est-ce qu'on va avoir une meilleure idée des appels d'offres qui ont été, en fait, le résultat des appels d'offres?
Bien, nous attendons, je pense qu'ils sont en train d'analyser leurs réponses et essayer d'avoir des premiers jets de à quoi ça peut ressembler, cette affaire-là. Et j'imagine qu'ils vont communiquer avec nous. J'avais bien indiqué que nous serions intéressés de participer, de collaborer avec... il y a de l'expertise dans la communauté pour aider à ça aussi et de l'intérêt. Alors, on verra bien.
Merci.
Alrighty, and if there are no more questions, then that will conclude our announcement today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here in person and anyone watching online as well.